The crystal chamber floated in space, orbiting a dead star that had collapsed long before humans learned to make fire. Inside the chamber, 200 aliens sat in circular rows, their seats rising higher and higher toward the domed ceiling. Some of the aliens had tentacles, some had scales. Others were made of what looked like living crystal or floating energy. They had come from every corner of the galaxy to be here today. At the center of the chamber, standing alone on a small platform, was Ambassador June. She was human. She wore a simple gray suit and carried a small bag. Her black hair was tied back and her face showed no emotion. She had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. She had practiced her speech 1,000 times, but she knew, deep in her heart, that it would not matter. The leader of the council was a creature called Vaxil. His body was long and serpentine, covered in purple scales that shimmered under the chamber's lights. He had no legs, only a powerful tail that coiled beneath him. His head was triangular, and his yellow eyes never blinked. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Ambassador June of Earth," Vaxil said, his forked tongue flicking between his teeth. "You stand before the Galactic Council to request admission for your species. This is your 3rd attempt in 50 years. Tell us why we should grant what we have twice denied." June took a deep breath. She activated the holographic display in front of her, showing images of Earth. Green forests, blue oceans, cities that sparkled at night. "My people have changed," she began. "We have ended our wars. We have cleaned our planet. We have built colonies on our moon and Mars. We have developed faster than light travel. We have followed every guideline you gave us 50 years ago." A sound rippled through the chamber. It took June a moment to realize what it was. Laughter. The aliens were laughing at her. A creature made of red crystal stood up. Its name was Mordathi, and it spoke with a voice like breaking glass. "You claim to have ended your wars? We have studied your history. Your species has fought in every generation since you learned to walk upright. You have killed billions of your own kind. You have destroyed entire ecosystems for profit. You create weapons not for defense, but for the joy of destruction." Another alien rose. This one was covered in thick gray fur and had 6 arms. It was a threll, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. "Humans are emotional creatures," the threll said in a deep voice. "You act on anger and fear. You cannot be trusted to make rational decisions. Your presence in this council would be dangerous." More aliens stood up, each one adding their voice to the criticism. They spoke of human violence, human greed, human unpredictability. They showed holographic images from Earth's history, wars, weapons, destruction. Every terrible thing humanity had ever done was displayed for the council to see. June stood in the center of it all, watching her species be torn apart by words. She wanted to argue. She wanted to defend her people. But she knew the rules. She could only speak when given permission, so she waited, her hands clasped behind her back, her face calm. Finally, Vaxil raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent. "We have heard enough," he said. "It is time to vote on whether humanity shall be admitted to the Galactic Council." He paused, his yellow eyes fixed on June. "All in favor of admission indicate now." Not a single light appeared. The voting system showed 0 approvals out of 200 delegates. "All opposed to admission indicate now." The chamber lit up like a festival. Every single alien voted against humanity. 200 red lights appeared on the display. It was unanimous. Vaxil's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "Ambassador June, the Council has decided to extend Earth's probationary period for another 100 years. You may return then to request admission again, assuming your species survives that long." More laughter echoed through the chamber. June nodded slowly. She had expected this. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small data chip, no bigger than her thumbnail. She walked forward and placed it on the podium in front of Vaxil. "Before I leave," she said quietly, "I would like you to watch something. It is a recording from 3 weeks ago, when the Krell swarm reached our sector." The laughter died immediately. Every alien in the chamber knew about the Krell. The Krell were a species of insect-like creatures that traveled in massive swarms, destroying everything they found. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply consumed entire planets and moved on. For the past 5 years, they had been moving through the outer rim of the galaxy, wiping out colony after colony. The Council's strategy had been simple: evacuate anyone in the Krell's path and abandon those who could not be saved. It was logical. It was rational. It saved the most lives. 17 civilizations had been completely destroyed, but hundreds more had been saved through strategic retreat. Vaxil looked at the data chip with his unblinking eyes. "The Krell reached your sector?" he asked. There was no mockery in his voice now. "They did," June said. "Our moon colony. 2 million humans lived there, along with 50,000 refugees from other species who had nowhere else to go." A Mordathi delegate spoke up, its crystalline body chiming softly. "The Council issued evacuation orders for that sector 2 months ago. Why did your people not leave?" "Some of our people did leave," June replied, "but not all of them could, and we do not abandon anyone who cannot escape on their own." She gestured to the data chip. "Please, watch what happened." Vaxil studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up the chip and inserted it into the podium. The chamber's lights dimmed, and the holographic displays that filled the air flickered to life. The council members settled back into their seats. Most of them looked bored. They had seen recordings of Krell attacks before. They knew how such things ended. A few aliens even continued their private conversations, not bothering to pay attention. But June stood at the center of the chamber, her eyes fixed on the display. She had watched this recording 20 times already. She had cried the first 10 times. But now her eyes were dry. Now she just waited for the council to understand what they were about to see. The video began with a peaceful image: Earth's moon, gray and cratered with a sprawling human colony visible on its surface. Domed cities connected by transparent tunnels, ships coming and going from the spaceport, people living their normal lives. Then the alarms started to sound. The peaceful image shattered as space itself seemed to tear open. Millions of dark shapes poured out of the rupture, like insects spilling from a broken nest. The Krell had arrived, and they had brought their entire swarm. The council chamber filled with the sound of alarms from the recording. Every alien stopped their conversations and turned to watch the holographic display. What they saw made even the oldest species in the galaxy lean forward in their seats. The Krell ships were not like normal spacecraft. They were alive. Each one was a massive organism, grown rather than built, with thick organic hulls that pulsed with sickly green light. The smallest ships were the size of houses. The largest were like floating mountains. They moved through space like a school of predatory fish, swift and deadly. And there were so many of them. Millions upon millions filling the space around Earth's moon until the stars themselves were blocked out. The swarm moved as one, guided by a collective intelligence that had destroyed 17 civilizations without mercy. Inside the lunar colony, Commander Minho stood in the central command center, surrounded by dozens of screens showing different views of the approaching swarm. He was a short man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, helping to evacuate as many people as possible. But there were still 500,000 humans on the moon, and 50,000 aliens from other species who had sought shelter here. All remaining evacuation ships, launch immediately, Minho said into his communications device. His voice was calm, but his hands shook as he gripped the edge of the command console. Priority to families with children and injured personnel. Everyone else get to the emergency shelters and seal the doors. On the screens, small civilian ships began lifting off from the spaceport, desperate to escape before the Krell arrived. But even as they launched, everyone in the command center knew the truth. There was not enough time. The Krell were moving too fast, and there were too many people left to save. A young officer named Hana turned from her station, her face pale. "Commander, the Krell will reach us in 14 minutes. The last evacuation ship needs at least 20 minutes to reach minimum safe distance." Minho closed his eyes for just a moment. Then he opened them and looked at the tactical display showing the positions of all human ships in the area. "Send a message to Captain G1, he said quietly. "Tell her we need more time." In space, far above the moon's surface, a human warship received the message. The ship was called the Defender, and it was nothing like the elegant vessels used by Council species. It was a brutal thing, all sharp angles and heavy armor, covered in weapons that had been designed for one purpose only: to kill. Captain Ji-won stood on the bridge of the Defender, reading Minho's message on a small screen. She was a tall woman with scars on her hands from years of military service. She had fought in the last war between Earth and Mars before humanity finally united. She knew what war cost. She knew what sacrifice meant. "How many ships do we have?" she asked her tactical officer. 217, Captain," came the reply. 43 destroyers, 86 frigates, 73 corvettes, and 15 support vessels. Ji-won looked at the tactical display. The Krell swarm numbered in the millions. Basic mathematics said that each human ship would need to destroy more than 10,000 Krell organisms to have any hope of stopping them. It was impossible. Any tactical computer would recommend immediate retreat. But Ji-won did not retreat. Instead, she opened a channel to every human ship in the sector. "All vessels, this is Captain Ji-won. I know what the odds look like. I know what the smart choice is. But down on that moon are 2 million people who are counting on us. They are our families, our friends, our fellow humans, and the aliens we have sworn to protect." She paused, looking at the approaching swarm on her display. "We are not leaving them. Form up on my position. We are going to buy them the time they need." In the council chamber, the aliens watched this exchange with expressions of disbelief. The Mordathi delegate who had mocked humanity earlier stood up, its crystalline body chiming with agitation. "This is madness. They cannot possibly win. They should evacuate while they still can," but June said nothing. She simply watched the display, her face carved from stone. On the screen, the human fleet began to move. Instead of retreating to safety, they accelerated toward the Krell swarm. They formed a defensive wall between the moon and the approaching enemy, their weapons powering up, their shields at maximum strength. The Krell, sensing the challenge, shifted their formation. The smaller organisms moved to the front, forming a living shield for the larger ships behind them. They began to accelerate, closing the distance between themselves and the human fleet. Ji-won stood on her bridge, watching the enemy approach. Her hands were steady now. Fear was a luxury she could not afford. "All ships weapons free. Target the smaller organisms first. I want every railgun, every missile, every weapon we have hitting them at maximum range. Do not let them close with us." The human fleet opened fire. Railguns launched solid slugs of metal at incredible speeds, crossing the distance between the fleets in seconds. Missiles streaked through space, leaving trails of fire behind them. Energy weapons painted the darkness with beams of destruction. The first wave of Krell organisms exploded in green bursts of organic matter, but for every Krell that died, 10 more took its place. The swarm absorbed the losses without slowing down. They fired back with their own weapons, streams of acid that could melt through steel, biological missiles that sought heat signatures, and electromagnetic pulses that scrambled electronics. The human ship Dauntless took a direct hit from a Krell acid weapon. The green liquid ate through the armor plating, exposing the interior to vacuum. 17 crew members died in seconds, but the ship's captain, a man named Taiho, did not pull back. Instead, he ordered emergency repairs and continued fighting, his damaged ship still firing every weapon it had. Another ship, the Resolute, lost all power when a Krell electromagnetic pulse hit its systems. The ship drifted helplessly through space, a perfect target. The Krell moved in for the kill, 3 large organisms closing on the disabled vessel, but before they could fire, 2 human frigates positioned themselves between the Resolute and the Krell, taking the enemy fire on their own shields while engineers on the Resolute worked frantically to restore power. In the council chamber, the watching aliens saw something they had never witnessed before. The humans were not fighting like a military force. They were fighting like a family, each ship willing to sacrifice itself to protect the others. When one vessel fell behind, others slowed to cover it. When ammunition ran low, ships shared their supplies. When casualties mounted, no one retreated. Vaxil watched the display with his unblinking eyes. He had seen 1,000 battles in his long life. He had witnessed the fall of civilizations and the birth of empires. But he had never seen anything like this. On the screen, the Krell reached the human defensive line. The 2 forces collided in a storm of fire and death. Human ships exploded. Krell organisms were torn apart. Space filled with debris and bodies. The battle raged on, violent and terrible and beautiful in its own horrifying way. And through it all, the evacuation ships continued to launch from the moon's surface, carrying civilians to safety, while the human fleet held the line above them. The battle intensified as the Krell swarm pressed forward with relentless hunger. The human defensive line began to buckle under the assault. Ships that had been firing continuously for 20 minutes were running low on ammunition. Shields were failing. Hulls were breaching. But still, the humans did not retreat. Captain Jiwan watched her tactical display as red indicators appeared across the screen, each one representing a damaged or destroyed vessel. The Defender shook as another Krell acid weapon struck the port side, melting through 2 decks before emergency bulkheads sealed the breach. She could hear the screams of her crew over the internal communications, but she forced herself to focus on the larger battle. "Weapons status," she called out. Her tactical officer, a young man named Kyung, responded immediately. "Railgun ammunition at 30%, missiles at 15%. Energy weapons still operational, but the capacitors are overheating." G1 made a decision that would have horrified any Council military commander. All ships' new orders. Load nuclear warheads on all remaining missiles. Set them for maximum yield. In the Council chamber, several aliens gasped. The use of nuclear weapons in space combat had been banned for 3,000 years. They were considered too crude, too dangerous, too unpredictable. The radiation alone could contaminate entire sectors of space. But the humans did not care about ancient bans. They cared about survival. Nuclear-tipped missiles launched from every human ship, streaking toward the densest concentrations of Krell organisms. The warheads detonated in brilliant flashes of light, each explosion vaporizing hundreds of Krell ships in an instant. The electromagnetic pulses from the detonations scrambled Krell communications, causing confusion in their formations. Yet even this was not enough. The Krell swarm was simply too large. For every 100 organisms destroyed, 1,000 more pushed forward. They began to break through the human line in several places, their smaller ships darting through gaps in the defense. Commander Minho watched from the Lunar Command Center as Krell ships began to approach the moon's surface. His hands clenched into fists. "All ground defense batteries open fire. Target the closest ships first." The moon's surface erupted with weapons fire. Hidden missile silos opened, launching their payloads into space. Electromagnetic railguns fired from concealed bunkers, sending metal slugs at hypersonic speeds. Laser defense systems painted the sky with beams of concentrated light, but the Krell kept coming. That was when Lieutenant Daeho made his choice. He was piloting a small corvette called the Last Stand, and his ship was nearly out of ammunition. His shields were down. His engines were damaged. By every measure, his ship was already dead. But Daeho himself was very much alive, and he was not ready to give up. "This is Lieutenant Daeho to all nearby ships," he said over the communications channel. "I am going to try something. If it works, I recommend others do the same." Before anyone could ask what he meant, Daeho aimed his ship directly at the largest Krell organism he could see, a massive carrier vessel that was spawning smaller ships from openings along its hull. He pushed his engines to maximum power, accelerating toward the enemy at speeds that made his ship's frame groan under the stress. The Krell carrier did not see him as a threat. A single small ship could not harm something so large. They ignored him, focusing on the larger human vessels that were still fighting. That was their mistake. At the last possible moment, Daeho ejected from his ship in an escape pod. The corvette continued forward on autopilot, slamming into the Krell carrier at tremendous speed. But Daeho had done one more thing before he ejected. He had overloaded the ship's fusion reactor and set it to detonate on impact. The explosion was visible from the surface of the moon. The Krell carrier simply ceased to exist, torn apart by the force of the detonation. The shockwave destroyed dozens of smaller Krell organisms around it, and the debris from the explosion damaged hundreds more. In the council chamber, the aliens watched in stunned silence. The Threll delegate spoke in a quiet voice. He used his own ship as a weapon. He sacrificed it deliberately. "Not just the ship," said Amordathi. "He risked his own life. The escape pod might not have worked. He could have died in that explosion. But Daeho had survived, and other human pilots had seen what he did. Across the battlefield, more human ships began to accelerate toward Krell targets, their crews ejecting at the last moment while their vessels became guided missiles. Some of the escape pods were destroyed by Krell weapons fire. Some of the crew did not make it out in time, but their sacrifices tore massive holes in the Krell formations. Meanwhile, on the moon's surface, a different kind of battle was beginning. Several Krell ships had landed near the colony, disgorging swarms of Krell warriors, insect-like creatures the size of large dogs. with razor-sharp claws and mandibles that could tear through metal. Sergeant Yuna led a squad of human Marines to intercept them. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she carried a heavy rifle that was almost as big as she was. Her squad wore armored suits designed for fighting in vacuum, their helmets sealed, their boots magnetic to keep them anchored to the lunar surface. "Remember your training," Yuna said over the squad channel as the Krell warriors skittered toward them across the gray lunar dust. "Short, controlled bursts. Aim for the head and thorax. Do not let them close with you." The Krell charged. The humans opened fire. Chemical propellant weapons, old-fashioned firearms that the Council species had abandoned centuries ago, roared in the silence of the moon's surface. The bullets tore through Krell carapaces and green blood splattered across the dust. But the Krell were fast and numerous. They reached the human line and the battle became brutal and close. Yuna's rifle clicked empty. She dropped it and drew a combat knife, stabbing upward into the soft underside of a Krell that leaped at her. Another Marine, a man named Junho, was tackled by 3 Krell warriors. He detonated an explosive charge on his belt, killing himself and the creatures attacking him. In the Council chamber, Vaxil's eyes widened. Council species did not fight like this. They used drones and automated systems. They fought from safe distances with energy weapons and smart missiles. They certainly did not engage in hand-to-hand combat with hostile aliens. But humans were different. Humans had evolved as hunters on a dangerous planet. They knew how to fight up close. They knew how to kill with their hands if necessary. And most importantly, they were willing to die to protect others. The video showed Yuna and her surviving Marines clearing the Krell away from the colony entrance, buying time for the last civilians to board evacuation ships. Behind them, the battle in space continued to rage. Captain Jiwan's ship, the Defender, was now listing badly to one side, trailing atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Half her crew was dead or wounded. Her weapons were nearly exhausted. But she kept fighting because that was what humans did. Then something new appeared on the tactical display, more Krell ships emerging from another rupture in space. These were not small organisms or even medium-sized carriers. These were capital ships, each one the size of a small moon, covered in biological weapons that could destroy entire fleets. And at the center of them all was the largest organism anyone had ever seen, the Krell Queen ship, the source of the swarm, the mother of millions. It was a mountain of living tissue and bone, pulsing with malevolent intelligence. The appearance of the Krell Queen ship changed everything. In the Council chamber, even the most stoic aliens reacted with visible fear. They had all heard the stories. The Queen was not just a ship. It was the intelligence that controlled the entire swarm. It could spawn new warriors in the middle of battle, growing them from its own mass and launching them into space. It had been present at the destruction of all 17 civilizations that the Krell had wiped out. And now it was here, at Earth's moon, bringing death with it. Captain Jiwan stared at her tactical display as the massive organism appeared on her screens. The Queen ship was so large that it distorted space around it, creating gravitational effects that pulled smaller objects toward it. Around it, the Krell swarm reformed into a protective formation, ready to defend their mother. "Status of the evacuation?" Jiwan asked, though she already knew the answer would not be good. Kyung checked his console, his hands shaking. "The last civilian ship just launched. They need another 15 minutes to reach safe distance." 15 minutes. Jiwan looked at what remained of her fleet. Out of 217 ships, only 70 were still combat capable. Many of those were badly damaged, running on emergency power, held together by the determination of their crews. Against the fresh Krell forces and the Queen ship, they had no chance of lasting 15 more minutes. But Jiwan did not think about winning anymore. She only thought about time. 15 minutes. They just needed to hold for 15 more minutes. She opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Captain Jiwan. I know you are tired. I know many of you are wounded. I know your ships are falling apart around you." She paused, taking a breath. "But those civilians need 15 more minutes. Our families need 15 more minutes. So we are going to give them 15 more minutes, even if it kills every last one of us. Form up on me. One more push." The response came from 70 different ships, 70 different crews. Not with words, but with actions. The damaged vessels moved into formation, their weapons charging one final time. Pilots who had been awake for 2 days straight gripped their controls with bloody hands. Engineers bypassed safety systems to squeeze every last bit of power from dying reactors. And then they charged. The human fleet accelerated directly at the Queen ship and her guards. It was suicide. Everyone knew it. But they did it anyway. The Krell responded with overwhelming firepower. Their weapons lit up space with streams of acid and biological missiles. The first wave of human ships was torn apart in seconds. The destroyer Vigilant exploded so violently that the pieces hit nearby Krell organisms, damaging them. The frigate Morning Star lost all power and drifted helplessly into a Krell formation, where it was torn apart by claws and weapons. But for every ship that fell, another took its place. The humans kept pushing forward, their weapons firing non-stop, their hulls absorbing damage that would have destroyed any Council vessel. On the bridge of the Defender, Ji-won felt her ship shake as another hit penetrated their armor. Sparks flew from consoles, the lights flickered. The artificial gravity failed, and everyone on the bridge began to float. But Ji-won grabbed a handhold and kept giving orders. "Target those spawn points on the Queen ship," she commanded. "Do not let her create more warriors." The remaining human ships concentrated their fire on the openings in the Queen's massive hull, where she was growing new Krell organisms. Nuclear missiles detonated against her biological armor, creating craters in her flesh. Railgun slugs punched deep into her body, causing green blood to pour into space. The Queen screamed. It was not a sound that could be heard in the vacuum of space, but every ship's sensors detected it. A psychic shriek of pain and rage that made human crew members clutch their heads in agony. The Krell swarm responded to their mother's pain with increased ferocity, throwing themselves at the human ships with suicidal abandon. In the chaos of battle, a single human corvette piloted by a woman named Minji found herself cut off from the rest of the fleet. Her engines were failing, her weapons were empty. Krell organisms surrounded her ship, closing in for the kill. Through her viewport, she could see the last evacuation ship in the distance, still accelerating away from the moon, still vulnerable. Minji made a choice. She redirected all remaining power to her shields and positioned her ship between the evacuation vessel and the nearest Krell attackers. She could not fire weapons. She could not run. But she could be a shield. The Krell fired on her ship with everything they had. Minji's shields held for 5 seconds. Then 10, then 15. Each second felt like an hour as her ship absorbed damage meant for the civilian vessel behind her. Her shield generators overloaded and exploded, killing the engineering crew. Fire spread through the corridors. The hull began to buckle, but Minji did not move. She kept her ship in position until the evacuation vessel was finally out of range. Only then did her ship break apart, and only then did Minji die. In the council chamber, several aliens turned away from the display, unable to watch anymore. But Vaxil kept his eyes fixed on the screen, his serpentine body coiled tight. On the lunar surface, Commander Minho watched the battle through his command center's displays. Most of his staff was gone now, evacuated on the earlier ships. Only a skeleton crew remained, including Minho himself. He had refused to leave while any of his people were still in danger. "Commander," said one of his remaining officers, a woman named Sora. "The reactor. If we overload it and create an electromagnetic pulse, we might be able to disrupt the Krell communications. It could give our fleet an advantage." Minho turned to look at her. "How long would we have to evacuate after starting the overload?" Sora's face was grim. 3 minutes. Maybe less. Not enough time to reach the spaceport and launch. Minho understood. Starting the overload would mean their deaths. He looked around at his small crew. 5 people who had chosen to stay behind, knowing they might not survive. "Everyone, this has to be a volunteer decision. If anyone wants to evacuate now, I will not think less of them." No one moved. No one left. "Then let us do it," Minho said quietly. For everyone else, Sora began the reactor overload sequence. The command center filled with warning alarms and flashing lights. Minho opened a channel to Captain Ji-won. "This is Commander Minho to all ships. In 90 seconds, we are going to create a massive electromagnetic pulse from the lunar base. Shield your sensitive equipment. This should disrupt Krell coordination for at least 2 minutes. Use that time wisely." Ji-won's voice came back, strained but grateful. "Understood, Commander. It has been an honor serving with you." "The honor was mine, Captain," Minho replied. Then he closed the channel and turned to his crew. "I want you all to know that you are the finest people I have ever had the privilege to command. Whatever happens next, humanity will remember what we did here today." The reactor countdown reached 0. The moon's surface erupted with electromagnetic energy, a pulse so powerful that it was visible from orbit as a blue-white wave expanding in all directions. Every Krell ship within range was instantly disabled. their organic electronics overloaded. The Queen ship itself shuddered, temporarily losing control of her swarm. The lunar base at the center of the pulse was vaporized instantly. Mignot and his crew died without pain, their sacrifice complete. And in that 2-minute window of Krell confusion, something new appeared on the human tactical displays. Reinforcements. Admiral Juan's battle group, racing from Mars at speeds that should have torn their ships apart, emerged from faster-than-light travel and immediately dove into the battle. Admiral Juan was an old man, past the age when most humans retired from military service. His hair was white and his face was creased with lines from a lifetime of difficult decisions. But his eyes were sharp and his mind was sharper. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, and assessed the battlefield with the cold calculation of someone who had seen war many times before. "Analysis," he said to his tactical officer. "The Queen ship is damaged, but still functional. Our forward fleet is down to approximately 60 ships, most critically damaged. The Krell swarm is temporarily disorganized due to the electromagnetic pulse, but they are already beginning to recover." Juan nodded. He had expected nothing less. The electromagnetic pulse had bought them time, but time alone would not win this battle. He needed something else, something the Krell would not expect. "Prepare the biological weapons," he ordered. His tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, the use of biological weapons against sapient species is prohibited by the Council's rules," Juan interrupted. "We are not members of the Council. They have made that very clear." He looked at the image of the Krell Queen ship on his display. "Besides, we are not using these weapons against sapients. The Krell are not intelligent in the way we understand intelligence. They are a swarm organism, no different than a plague of locusts, and we are going to treat them accordingly." The Indomitable and the other ships in Juan's battle group began launching thousands of small pods. To the watching Krell, they looked like standard missiles. The Krell ships that had recovered from the electromagnetic pulse moved to intercept them, destroying dozens of pods with their weapons, but they could not destroy them all. The pods that survived the Krell defenses began to open, releasing clouds of microscopic organisms into space. These were not natural bacteria. Human scientists had been studying the biological samples from destroyed Krell ships for years, learning how their organic technology worked. And then they had created something specifically designed to attack it. The bacteria spread through space, seeking the heat signatures of Krell ships. When they found their targets, they began to consume the organic material, reproducing exponentially. Within minutes, Krell ships began to show signs of decay. Their hulls started to crack. Their weapons stopped functioning. Their propulsion systems failed. The Queen ship, largest of all Krell organisms, took the longest to show effects. But even she was not immune. The bacteria ate through her outer layers, causing massive wounds to open across her body. She writhed in space, trying to purge the infection, spawning antibodies from her own mass to fight the invading organisms. But the human scientists had designed their weapon well. The bacteria adapted to each defense the Queen created, mutating and evolving faster than she could respond. It was humanity's own diseases, weaponized and turned against an enemy. In the council chamber, the watching aliens recoiled in horror. Vaxel's voice was sharp. "They weaponized biological agents. This is forbidden. This is barbaric." But June spoke for the first time since the video began. Her voice was quiet but carried through the chamber. "Yes. We took our own plagues, the diseases that killed millions of our people throughout our history, and we turned them into weapons. You call it barbaric. We call it using every tool at our disposal to protect innocent lives." On the screen, the battle reached its conclusion. The Queen ship, her mass rapidly decomposing, released one final psychic scream before her consciousness faded. Without their Queen to coordinate them, the remaining Krell organisms scattered in confusion. Some tried to flee. Others attacked each other. The swarm fell apart. The surviving human ships did not pursue. They formed a defensive perimeter around the moon and began rescue operations, searching for survivors in the wreckage of destroyed vessels. They pulled pilots from damaged escape pods. They cut through twisted metal to reach trapped crew members. They saved everyone they could, both human and alien alike. The video showed the final statistics. The human fleet had started with 217 ships. Only 36 survived the battle. More than 12,000 crew members had died. The lunar base was destroyed completely, but every single civilian had been evacuated successfully. Not one was left behind. The recording ended. The holographic displays faded. The council chamber was silent. June stood at the center of the chamber, her face still calm, though tears now ran down her cheeks. "That is what you call primitive," she said softly. "That is what you call warlike and emotional and unstable." She looked around at the assembled aliens. "But that is also what we call protecting those who cannot protect themselves." She pulled out another data chip and placed it on the podium. "This contains records of 11 other battles. 11 other times when the Krell attacked, and 11 other times when human forces evacuated council colonies that you had abandoned. We lost 63% of our military capacity in these engagements. Nearly 100,000 humans died." She paused. "But we saved over 50 million aliens from species across the galaxy. We saved them because it was the right thing to do, not because we expected anything in return." Vaxil was the first to speak. His voice had lost all its earlier mockery. "You have been fighting the Krell alone this entire time? While we evacuated our colonies and left the outer rim to its fate?" "Yes," June said simply. A Mordathi delegate rose, its crystalline body no longer chiming with arrogance. "We calculated the survival odds for those colonies. They were too low. We deemed them not worth the cost of defending." "We calculated the same odds," June replied. "Then we went anyway." Another alien, a Threll elder with fur that had turned gray with age, stood slowly. "I have lived for 900 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed countless wars. But I have never seen anything like what you humans just showed us." The Threll paused, its 6 arms trembling. "We called you primitive. We were wrong. You are not primitive. You simply value different things than we do." Around the chamber, more aliens began to stand. Some of them were crying, if their species was capable of tears. Others showed emotions that were harder for June to interpret. But she understood the meaning nonetheless. Vaxil uncoiled his serpentine body and rose to his full height. "Ambassador June, I owe your species an apology. We judged you based on your history, without considering what you had become. We saw your capacity for violence and missed your capacity for sacrifice." He looked at the other council members. "I call for a new vote. All in favor of granting humanity immediate admission to the Galactic Council, indicate now." 200 lights appeared on the display. Every single alien voted in favor. It was unanimous, but June did not smile. Instead, she looked tired. "Thank you," she said. "But you should know something. We did not fight the Krell to earn your approval. We fought them because people needed help, and we were able to provide it. That is what we do. That is who we are." She picked up her bag, preparing to leave. "We will accept your invitation to join the council, but we will not change who we are to fit your expectations. If you want humans in this council, you get all of us. The good and the bad, the violence and the compassion, the logic and the emotion. We will not pretend to be something we are not." Vaxil bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect. "We would not ask you to. In fact, we realize now that we need you to be exactly who you are. For too long, this council has been guided only by logic and calculation. We have forgotten what it means to fight for something beyond survival. You humans remember. You can teach us." June finally allowed herself a small smile. "Then we have much to learn from each other." As she left the chamber, the 200 alien delegates stood in silence, processing what they had witnessed. They had spent centuries building a civilization based on reason, on careful calculation of costs and benefits. They had believed themselves to be advanced, sophisticated, evolved beyond the crude emotions that drove lesser species. But they had forgotten something important. Sometimes the most advanced thing a civilization can do is remember how to care, how to sacrifice, how to fight not for conquest or gain, but simply because it is the right thing to do. The humans had not forgotten, and now finally they were going to teach the galaxy what that meant. In the days that followed, the news of humanity's admission to the Council spread throughout known space. But more importantly, the recordings of the human battles against the Krell spread even faster. Every species in the galaxy watched in amazement as this young, violent, emotional species did what the ancient Council races had not been willing to do. They had stood their ground. They had protected the weak. They had refused to abandon anyone, even at terrible cost to themselves. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of something it had almost forgotten, that sometimes the most logical choice is to do the illogical thing. To fight when you should run, to sacrifice when you should save yourself, to care when it would be easier not to. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not technology or resources or military power, though they had those in abundance. Their gift was something far more valuable. They showed the ancient species that evolution did not mean leaving behind the parts of yourself that made you care about others. Ambassador June returned to Earth a hero. But she knew the truth.